Welcome to another episode of Lead Empower TV. I am your host, Nathan Mitchell. If you want to grow your business or lead your team more effectively, there's one shift that has to happen. You have to stop guessing and start making decisions based upon what is actually working. Today's guest is helping organizations do exactly that. Dr. Alaina Szlachta is an academic turned entrepreneur and the founder of By Design Development Solutions, where she equips training and coaching firms to use their own data to stand out in a crowded marketplace, attract the right clients, reduce churn, and expand their intellectual property. With a background in research and public health education, Alaina specializes in turning raw information into clear, actionable systems, from data audits to collection and analysis strategies that actually drive revenue and influence. She's also the anchor of measurement and evaluation on a Shoestring, a resource designed to make measuring impact simple, practical, and accessible, no matter your level of expertise. If you've ever felt like you're making important decisions based more on instinct than insight, I guarantee this conversation is going to challenge that and show you a better way forward. Alaina, welcome to the show. So grateful to have you with us here today. How are you doing so far?
Thank you, Nathan. I'm so pleased to be here. I cannot wait to have this conversation because growth and even an increase in your business's value is on the other side of data. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, and it's a new topic, data, that we haven't had on the show before. So excited to dig into this conversation today. And we'll start here. You know, a lot of leaders, they have data, but they aren't really using it. Maybe they don't know how to use it. Where do you see most organizations getting stuck when it comes to actually leveraging the data that they do have?
Well, getting stuck is the right way to describe it. There are a couple of obstacles that often get in the way of using our data. One is that we have data, but it's messy. And to use it takes time. And we're like, oh, I'll get to that one day. And then we never get to it. There is a better way, which is, instead of having to clean your data, to think about how you're going to collect it in the first place, to make it cleaner on the front end and eliminate the back end messiness. But unfortunately, most of us don't think about data in the front end in the systems. And so we've got a bunch of messiness to clean up. The other thing is, sometimes we don't know what data we actually have. And it's because it lives inside of, for example, our CRM, and our sales team is having conversations with prospects, or they're enacting the workflows they have in the whole customer service journey or sales journey. And there's data there, but we just don't know. We don't know that we can be looking at that and making some meaning out of it. So I think things like notes in our CRM, or how many of us now have Zoom calls auto recorded and we've got our note takers, or we've got our Zoom AI companion turned on, and we have access to all of the conversations that we're having in any area, but we're not using it. That's data too. So I think there's a bucket of data that you don't know. And we'll talk about how we can start using some of those things more intentionally, because not all data matters equally. And then lastly, one of the saddest obstacles, and I say sad because technology is a gift, but it can also be a burden. And the gift, we can all imagine the results of the right technology. It saves us time. It gives us access to new data, new information, or we can deliver our products more effectively with a higher quality. You name it, technology can offer it. But we might get so excited as we're building our businesses. We buy this technology and we buy this tool and we buy these things. And all of a sudden we've got all these disparate systems and they don't talk to each other. And so while there might be data in those systems, we don't really know what data there is, and we might not know how to access it, nor do we know how to connect that data to data that lives in other places in the organization. So the simplest answer, Nathan, is that it's a mess. We've got our data, but it's so messy that we can't take advantage of it. And so that's the biggest obstacle that I see.
Well, what are the biggest challenges when it comes to data, especially when you look at, startup firms or maybe smaller organizations that have only been in business, let's say 12 to 24 months? Do you think it's a combination of data overload and not knowing what to do with it? Or is it, we have all this and we don't know what we don't know, or we don't even know where we should start to measure?
I think all of the above. When you think about a startup company, sometimes they get venture capital, and with it, They get the guidance of experts who've been around for ages. And this expert loves this technology, or they love HubSpot, or they love these other tools. And so when you get not only capital, but then you get the support of experts, you get all of their own agendas and all of their own visions. And so when we start to scale, sometimes we grow too fast in terms of what we're adopting, not only in vision and plan, but also the infrastructure. And then our infrastructure gets really messy. So one of the examples I talk about in my book is Gary Keller of Keller Williams. He started Keller Williams Realty International. And oh, by the way, Gary Keller and Jay Papasan were my last bosses when I worked for a corporate job before going out on my own. I learned a lot from them. And Gary, in the 1980s, made the executive decision that as Keller Williams grew, and now we all can think of a Keller Williams brokerage in our own communities, as Keller Williams grew, Gary said every single market center is going to use our technology. And so what that enabled for Keller Williams corporate was that they could see all of the data around when an agent entered their ecosystem. How long did it take before they made their first sell? How large are the sales that agents are doing? How does that differ by community? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So Gary Keller made a decision before he became what Keller Williams is today. Many, many years later, he made a strategic systems choice that says no matter what, we are all going to be using the same tool to track all of the agent engagements. And when I last worked at Keller Williams back in 2017 to 2019, they decided to become a technology company, and they actually built their own CRM for KW agents, which enabled them to get a whole heck of a lot more data, not just on sales, but in the marketing process and all the things that are happening leading up to landing a new client, closing a house, et cetera. So the visibility that Gary Keller enabled through his strategic systems decisions really is what made Keller Williams then and today stand out in the marketplace. So when you think about how are we going to grow, whether you're just getting started or you're maybe merging with another company, or you're thinking strategically about, hey, I made a bunch of mistakes and I want to do it differently. Think about the systems that you're investing in and how they talk to each other or they don't, so that you can get as much insight into all the nuances in your business as possible to make the mess go away and to be able to see things that you maybe wouldn't see before, all because of the strategic use of the systems and the technology that you're using to back those systems.
You know, one of the things that I like about what you teach, especially, is around the idea of differentiation, especially when you have organizations, training and development, you know, for example, can be a crowded space at the end of the day, right? So I'm really interested in how organizations can use data to differentiate themselves in the marketplace. So what does that look like in practice, you know, for a coaching or training organization that feels like they're just blending in and really need to stand out?
Yeah, well, it is a very important thing to consider whether you're a training and coaching company or a technology company. And I want to go back to the Keller Williams example and just contrast Keller Williams to the profession of coaching, training, executive development. So in the Keller Williams example, they use systems to enable data. The data enabled them to see things, have insights, share best practices at scale to make their agents more successful and to be the number one real estate company by agent count and sales volume, et cetera. So they needed data first to get insights to then offer those insights back as value to the members of their ecosystem. That's very different than if you are in the services industry and you're doing services based on a specific vision and approach. So what differentiates professional development, training, and coaching companies from one another is their approach. So in this case, data enables your approach. It's not data that comes first, which may be different from other types of industries or organizations. So if you don't have a really solid approach that's either frameworked or documented, or a process that you've got articulated that you deliver and refine over and over and over again, once that's crystal clear, then you're ready to take data and systems and build a data collection infrastructure that enables your approach to be amplified with data. So you can see how your approach is working and be able to articulate that through a vast amount of data. But it's not a data first thing. It's clarifying your approach first, and then the data can amplify that and make you really stand out.
Yeah, and as I think about an organization that maybe is not using data, maybe they're just beginning to use it or haven't been using it the right way. I think it's easy for organizations and leaders to become overwhelmed.
Mm-hmm.
The whole paralysis from overanalysis type things. So for an organization that feels overwhelmed by measurement and data and analytics, where's a simple place, for them to start if they really want to prove the impact of the work that they're doing? And you've been talking about the Keller Williams example, and I think one of the benefits to what they did is it gives them an opportunity to have consistency, right, with all of their agents and the data that they're collecting and what's working and what's not working. But where does an organization start that hasn't done it before, and they want to improve the impact of their work?
So if we're talking about the professional services sector, and even specific to training, coaching, where they've struggled the entire length of the industry to say, what's the real return on the investment that we're providing? In the past, if you were a services company, if you had great testimonials and 5-star ratings, that would be enough. That would be sufficient to bring people into your ecosystem. But now we know that, well, anybody can get 5-star ratings. And even more important, just because somebody likes your service doesn't mean that it caused the intended transformation or change that you promised them up front. And so, as I mentioned before, if you are in the training and professional development coaching sector, you need to know what your approach is. And I think of that in 2 ways. And one or both of them could resonate. One is what uniquely does your approach solve in terms of problems? So is it that there's drama in an organization? Is it that teams are emotionally disconnected? Is it that a team isn't productive and your approach uniquely solves those problems? That helps you to clarify and differentiate yourself. And again, we build our data systems to amplify that. For some people, it's not about solving problems. It's about creating something that wasn't possible and making it possible. So they're more about creating something anew, and that's still a transformation and a change that they're creating, but it's not necessarily solving a specific problem. It's taking them into the future. That could be creating the next generation of leaders. There's not necessarily a problem, but we're trying to get ahead of the problem that might come in the future. So we're creating something anew, and our approach uniquely makes that possible. So you've got to be really clear on that. And I would even argue, be clear on, are you solving a problem, or are you making something possible that wasn't there before? And then what is it and how do you do it? So get your team aligned on that. And then you can ask yourselves as a team, what data do we need to prove it? So again, data in the professional services sector is an amplifier. It's not the thing that we're selling. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Very good. Very good. Yeah, I know that you've worked across data audits, systems, and various workflows. What's one mistake that you often see leaders make when trying to implement data systems that actually cost them growth?
So a couple good examples that I'm dealing with right now. So a guy reaches out to me on LinkedIn, and he's got this really cool product. I mean, genuinely a cool product. We did a quick conversation. He showed me a demo, and he is solving a gap in the industry. And that is, this particular tool helps to measure team growth. So a lot of coaches or training companies, they specialize in team development, but they don't really know how to measure, is the team growing and what specifically is changing in the team. So this guy reaches out, I see his product, I love it. I've actually got a client that wants to measure impact at 3 different levels: individual growth, team growth, and organizational growth and change. I'm like, ooh, maybe this tool could solve for the team one. And then I ask him the question, so how does your tool integrate or maybe embed in my client's existing ecosystem? He's like, well, let me get back to you on that one. And so that's the sort of crux, is that there's a lot of great tools out there, but they require you to log into their ecosystem and set up a username and a profile, and it's not scalable. Imagine if I offer 10 different team development pathways, and I've got it all built out into my own ecosystem. And then I want to use the measurement tool, but I have to send people to a different system and set up different accounts. And there's no clear way to just make that whole thing seamless, because the company didn't think about that. They didn't think about the user experience. Now, some companies have got that in the bag. And so what I suggest is that you're not only vetting a tool or technology's capability to either measure impact or collect data or deliver a product, you also need to be vetting the capabilities of these tools to seamlessly integrate with your existing ecosystem, because you've made smart choices as a leader in terms of what platforms you're using to develop and deliver your products. You made those choices for a reason. So anyone that wants to work with you that sells a measurement tool, an assessment, video-based simulations that have AI embedded that allow you to measure the change in conversations, or practicing firing people, or practicing performance reviews, you name it, there's so many great tools out there. But if they don't naturally seamlessly integrate, they're going to cause more problems than they are going to have a great impact. So we have to think about that first.
Yeah, and especially the larger the organization is, right? I mean, if you have 40 or 50 employees, it may not be that big of a deal to come in and launch a platform and have specific user IDs and those kinds of things. But logistically, I could see how that could be really problematic for an organization that has thousands of employees. So even though the benefit on the back end is going to be good for the organization, it creates a whole other problem entirely.
Yeah, and that's just one tool. That's one team assessment tool. What if you're doing multiple initiatives? You got this team development and this leadership development and this onboarding and all these different initiatives, and they have naturally different measure. We're not going to use the same measurement tool for a team development program as we are going to the new hire program, or a large corporate enterprise isn't going to get the same thing as a small startup company. So we have intentionally different tools and systems that we use to deliver different products and experiences, but they're all going to need to be built on the same ecosystem for that to be a seamless experience for all of your clients.
You know, Alaina, from your perspective, how does getting serious about data shift the way a leader makes decisions and ultimately leads their organization day to day?
So this one is an easy answer for me. And it's that with data, we can see things that we couldn't see before. It's that simple. I mean, data gives us visibility. One thing that it's predicated on, however, is that the data has to be clean and it has to have integrity. I think sometimes leaders make decisions, they get data points without any sort of validation or methodology behind where the data came from. And maybe somebody wants to advocate for, hey, we should buy this tool or we should invest in this thing. Here's the data, but they can't show the method behind the madness. Like, here's how we came to the conclusion. That's not clear, trustworthy data. So of course, the shift is made possible when our data is clean and it has integrity. And as leaders, I would always be asking those questions just to make sure I understand how you came to this conclusion. Where did the data come from? Can you spend 30 seconds and just tell me what's the methodology that gave you to those insights? And then the other thing, and this I can't take credit for, I also write about this in my book, for the professional services, specifically team development, leadership development sector, where they've struggled with ROI, we've got to get alignment. And this is between clients and prospective training companies, but also internal organizations. A lack of alignment is what stops organizations from being effective. A leader can't communicate their vision. They've got a team that doesn't believe in them. When we have really good data, the data is what allows everybody to see the vision. So the leader can say, I'm making the decision to do this, and here's the data behind it, and here's how I've analyzed the data, so everybody can see and create alignment. And then similarly, if you as an individual contributor, or if you're a middle management or director and you want to pitch an idea to your leadership team and say, hey, I think this could really make a difference, use some data, talk about, okay, quickly, here's where I got it from, here's how I analyzed it, here's how I made these choices. Present your own vision, gives you buy-in, creates alignment. When everybody can see the same thing, they can have more productive conversations. They can debate the pros and cons. They can debate risks versus rewards. And then everybody gets bought in. That alignment is what makes organizations incredibly efficient and effective. And data is what's behind all of that.
You know, Alaina, this has been such a valuable conversation. I think we could easily talk for an hour about this, but unfortunately, we only have a few minutes left. I really appreciate the way you break down something that can feel complex for leaders and organizations and make it practical and actionable for businesses at every level. But I want to give you the opportunity before we dismiss just to share where those listening to our episode today can learn more about you, get your book, go to your website, connect with you on LinkedIn, those kinds of things.
Well, thank you for inviting me to share that. You can find me at dralaina.com, and I've got a link where you can read more about my book, download a free chapter. I've got a community of practice for anyone that provides learning at any level, from individual contributor all the way up to a founder of a leadership company. And every month we dig into what are your biggest challenges and how can we as a community help you? It's an amazing source of insights, and for me, a source of like, what are people being challenged by now, and how is that evolving over time? So that's a free community. I love hosting it. And I also write a Substack, and I have weekly tactical and unique perspectives on how we can be better using our data, and all of that is available on my website.
All right. Well, Alaina, thank you again so much for being here and for the work that you're doing to help organizations lead with intention and with insight through the use of data. And to everyone tuning in to this episode, if this conversation challenged you or gave you a new perspective, make sure you subscribe. Make sure you share it with somebody on YouTube or LinkedIn or Facebook, wherever you're watching. Share this with someone on your team. Keep leading empowered. Keep the momentum going. We'll see you next time on Lead Empowered TV. Thank you again, Dr. Alaina. Pleasure having you. It's been a great conversation.